that you might encounter along the way. I'm joined by three awesome panelists. Maybe I'll let them all introduce themselves given how accomplished their backgrounds are. We can start with Loren here on my left.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Loren Alhadeff. I am here at Madrona as a venture partner. I've been here for about just shy of 3 years now. And prior to that, I was the Chief Revenue Officer at Docusign, where I joined in 2008. The company was about $2.5 million in revenue, and I stayed through the end of 2022 and led the company through an IPO. And when I exited, the company was about $3 billion in revenue. So I've got sort of very early stage, which by the way is a lot of fun for me to be spending time here with a lot of the early stage founders, because I think a lot of people say, gosh, I think you're sort of more of a big company guy, but the fact of the matter is that some of my most cherished memories were the early stages of trying to figure things out. And now I have this opportunity to do it with the Madrona portfolio companies. So very excited about this evening.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, my name is Patrick, one of the co-founders at Clarify, based in Seattle, moved here in 2019. Clarify is a autonomous CRM. This is kind of where we're putting a lot of our energy and effort to help folks like you help automate your go-to-market motions. Before this, did another startup that was acquired in 21. So I've gone through kind of the early stages of finding product market fit and scaling out kind of what a go-to-market motion might look like, never to the extent of Docusign. And before this, I worked on growth at Atlassian. So I've been through a couple different stages of working at companies that had 10,000 person plus field teams to really PLG motions as well.
Not yet to the scale of Docusign.
Not yet.
That's the key factor, and for everybody here. So not yet.
Hey everybody, I'm Collin. I'm the co-founder of Predictable Revenue. I started a cold email agency 14 years ago as a way of bootstrapping a software business into existence. I got that $0 to $1 million in ARR in 3 months, and then managed to crash it into a mountain in the most fun way. All of the dumb things I did are documented in the book. I wrote the book, which is coming from startups and doing customer development and interviewing people was a very weird experience, because you want to try and interview a lot of people, but it is kind of the opposite of like building good software. You can't really do a ton iteratively, and I tried to through the newsletter, but it is very much sometimes you just have to sit down and write, and I did most of it before AI was any good, and so I didn't get any help from my friend Claude at all in the book. Actually, that's not true. I did have ChatGPT do the last 4 pages, which is the founder summary. And so if you're like, hey, where do I start in this book? Just skip to the very, very end, and there's that's the only AI generated text, because I was just fucking tired of writing. I don't want to write anymore. This seems perfect. Copy paste the PDF in. I'm like, just give me what a founder would want. This is what I want at the end of every book. And so I was like, this is my gift to you. This is what I want. I hope you enjoy that piece of it. So I've done predictable revenue for 14 years. I've done some services businesses. I've done Carb.io, which was $0 to $1 million in ARR, and then a bunch of things of varying success. And I'm working on a go-to-market tool right now. Before this, I was a dirty sales guy. I helped a couple of entrepreneurs either start a division or go 0 to 1 and start their company as the only account exec, sales manager, just jack of all trades kind of guy. And I got to do that a couple of times before I realized I'm tired of doing this for other people. I want to do this for myself.
Awesome. And Collin's book is actually right here on the left, so feel free to take a copy. He's generously given those away, and there's some other free swag over there as well, so feel free to grab that later on your way out. So one of the things that I want to unpack first is that this idea that companies are scaling from, call it 1 to 10 million, maybe faster than ever before. In this AI era, there's a lot of ability, maybe to your earlier point, Collin, to use Claude to build products, to get them out in the market, and they're scaling. People are buying them at speed. But that's also kind of a fundamentally different thing than maybe before in the SaaS era, so to speak. If you got to 10 million, people might have said, oh, you've actually found quote unquote product market fit. So one of the things that I'm curious to understand is what is fundamentally different about this idea of product market fit in this AI era? How do you guys think about it? What are maybe like setting the stage? How should people here be thinking about what does that actually mean? Maybe you can start with Loren.
Sure. So, it's an interesting time indeed. And one of the things I've sort of reflected back about what product market fit was at Docusign and what it is today with all of these new AI companies. And the biggest thing for me is with Docusign, it really felt like a stage. It felt like you had arrived at product market fit because you had a product that could be deployed and was connected into all these different applications and the infrastructure inside of an organization, where today it doesn't feel like, it feels like it's a state. It's an ongoing state. There's no such thing as we now have it, so we're good now. It's sort of a state of being that I think organizations have to think about. I think that's fundamentally different than what it was many moons ago with sort of the early and even middle days of Docusign's journey. So I think that's one of the bigger sort of general thematic ways to think about it. More specifically, and I was talking to one of my colleagues today about it, I think there's two things. One is probably more oriented around strategy, which is the identity of your company. We talk to a lot of companies that you sort of start to really get into what they do, and it becomes so broad so quickly. And because they kind of want to be everything to everyone. And I think when you do that, you're kind of nothing to everyone. And I think you start to lose your identity of who you are as a business and the problems that you want to solve. The other piece is more product-oriented, which I think is a lot more oriented around the product wedge that you have. And I think about it as in, you know, if somebody is using your product and you go to them tomorrow and say, we're removing your product, we're going to take it out and unplug it from your ability to use it. What's the reaction? You know, is it like a panic? Is it like, oh, well, how would we operate without it? Then you have fit. If the reaction is, well, yeah, but there's like 6 other things that I kind of know about that I think sort of do some of the similar things, and it's actually pretty easy to just swap over, that's not fit. So it goes back to my first point of this idea of arriving, which is I think what it used to be, to the state of being product market fit, which I think is an innovator's dilemma, really, right? Because you're constantly iterating to make sure that your users are ingrained with the product and using it and adopting it and all of those things. So that's how I would think about it.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing I'd add to that is like we're through like a constant state of change right now. Like this is the most exciting time to build and also the most terrifying time to build, right? Because you can find product market fit and lose it next day or become just yet another AI feature, especially if you're just beholden to the foundational model companies for different things today. I think there's also this question like what's durable revenue? And it's the question, I think there's a lot of companies that are growing relatively quickly, but how durable is that revenue for them? And how much is that going to be kind of a generational company as well? I think one of the things that's interesting, and I totally agree, like the Sean Ellis product market fit question is like one of my favorite questions because it's a question of like, that's the depth of love that somebody's going to have for your product. It's like, hey, and that's the difference between building a B product and an A+ product. And it takes way harder, even today, it's like really easy to vibe code something, but you're probably vibe coding something that might be like C grade. I say that's not necessarily product market fit. You might get some initial attraction and adoption and customer feedback, but like to build an A+ product, that still takes a lot of time, energy, and effort. And that's where I think taste is still something that matters a lot today.
So maybe on that point there, I'd like to double click. So how do you distinguish what is considered maybe high experimentation, people leveraging the product, playing around with the product, between what are the actual signals that you should actually say, okay, this is actually somewhat of the product market fit. I like how Loren, you kind of talked about if you ripped it away from them today, maybe that's some version of it. But what are the specific signals that you guys are all thinking about or looking for to distinguish that, especially in today's era where usage doesn't equal, you know, finding product market fit, so to speak?
I mean, it's funny. So like we spent a lot of time at Amplitude. I think like the intersection of qualitative and quantitative is this notion of like how do you measure it? Because like the qualitative feedback for us as an early stage startup is probably more important than the quantitative right now. But I mean, we're tracking things like DAU, time in the application. But even if you think about time in the application, a lot of folks are actually interacting with Clarify via Claude and other kind of these agentic systems via our API, and that's still providing active value, but it's something that's like, we can measure it, but it's not the traditional sense of like, hey, somebody logging into the CRM and logging data. But for us, it's like, yeah, a lot of it comes down to like looking at quantitative data, like how are people using our product, having conversations with our customers, and like part of that's like, hey, like what are the things that you're using? What are the things that are missing? And like what are the areas that we need to go deeper in order to improve your existing experience? And so yeah, it really comes down to kind of combining that intersection of the quant and the qual data for us.
I think for the very early stage, I can kind of answer that because I'm there. I spend a lot of time working with startups that are in that space, and I really like the leaning into the referral and like looking at the referral quotient of like how many people do I talk to, even when I start doing customer development for maybe a new product idea. How easy is it to ask somebody at the end of an interview, hey, do you know anybody else I could talk to about this? Could you refer me to 2 or 3 other people just to interview? And that to me is like a really great proxy for, am I onto something that people actually care about, or do they not care? Did I not do a good job in the interview? And so I look very closely at the number of people that I get a referral from at the interview step, all the way kind of through from different stages in that early funnel.
How many people are pre-product market fit in the room?
That's a good question.
Okay. How many people are post-product market fit? Okay, how many people on the post-product market fit side, like greater than 50 million, greater than 100 million in revenue? Okay, so less than that. Okay, helpful.
Awesome. And we'll talk a little bit about what it means to find product market fit at different stages too, I think a little bit later on. But one of the things that you were talking about, Patrick, too, is this idea of taste and this idea that because you can vibe code so many products and because it's so easy to try and experiment these different things, one of the things that I'm curious about in terms of actually finding that product market fit is embedding maybe into certain set of workflows, getting that kind of usage, that stickiness, showing over time that you're renewing the customers. What are some ways in which you can think about, I know maybe in the Docusign days, once you sold the product, it was extremely sticky and people kind of just stuck on and stayed around. But in this new era, is there some way to think about developing a product so that it actually sticks into how users are using? Maybe it's through Claude, maybe it's through these other things. Like, what are some things that have worked or you've seen work for some of the companies that you work with or at your respective companies?
I mean, for us, it is a great question. I think a lot of people we're still at this and generally we all work in tech, right? So if you think about building software for other tech companies, we're in a bit of an echo chamber where we think everyone's adopting AI, but that's just generally not the case. Like, we're still very much in the early majority. And so like 99% of people out there don't know how to use AI effectively in their job today, right? Like my brother works for the state of California. They don't even have an AI tool. Right? Like, it's very clear. It's like most of the state of California does not have access
That might
to
take some
tools.
time.
It is, and in his mind, he's like, hey, AI is disrupting the rest of the world, but like, I'm a government employee. I have the best security in the world. And so I think this is the case where it's worth noting that like when it comes to the education and the amount of effort, like you can build a tool, but especially if you're changing workflow, a lot of that's educating those customers. And that's like where forward deployed engineer model is talked a lot about. We talk a lot about like even forward deployed go-to-market engineers. So like when we onboard a growth customer for us, they have access to like a go-to-market engineer to actually help them set up the product. And I think just from my product background, I would love to build a product that like is just so damn intuitive that everyone can get up and running. But at the end of the day, there's some effort involved today. So like we lean in with kind of that services model to help them. And that seems to be working now, I'd say, better than it did about 6 months ago. And a lot of that's because we assume people know how to use our software, but that might not necessarily be the case yet.
I think the only other thing that I would add is how companies think about value, and whether it's company value or user value, because I think there's a lot of times where adoption is a direct correlation to satisfaction. And I can tell you there's really great companies out there that the large part of their user base are not necessarily satisfied with their product. Salesforce is a great example. That's more of an organizational value. There's a reason that companies buy that product and they push that product down. If you ask the frontline practitioner, do you love this thing? It's like, I will do whatever it takes to not use it, but my boss tells me I have to use it. And it's not to say it's not a good product, because it has great attributes. But I think how people think about adoption and value and the correlation between those things is shifting.
I totally agree. And the Salesforce thing is so funny. I mean, if anyone's on it, you should definitely be switching over to Clarify. It seems like that's definitely a plug there. I think users are a little bit happier there. The CSAT scores are maybe a little higher. I'm curious, as many of the audience is pre-product market fit, maybe Collin, would love to hear your perspective. Are there signs that you've seen where something might start to look like product market fit, but maybe in reality aren't quite yet there? Like, what are the things that people should be thinking about as, oh, this might be product market fit, but I'm not quite sure, or actually double down on certain things if it is starting to look like product market fit?
Yeah, I remember this question. I thought, oh, there's all these companies that you could just pull up here and roast. But when you look at, like, the way I think about product market fit is, I agree with you about it's not a binary switch. It's not a thing that you have and then it's a light switch that's on and you have it forever. I see it as existing on a bit of a spectrum, and the product market fit, that strength is a big multiplier of your go-to-market engine. And so the stronger your product market fit is, the more you're going to get out of that engine. And where I saw this for the first time, and it was right in my face, because I had a product company, I had a cold email agency, and one of our product customers left and then was hired as Uber's VP of sales when they were launching Uber Everything. Well, it's called Uber Eats now, but it was Uber Everything at the time. And the average services customer, we would spend 1,000 emails, and we'd get 10, 15, maybe 20 replies, 30 if it was like Toptal. I think we launched their first outbound, and we got like 45 emails off 1,000, or 45 meetings off of 1,000 emails, which was like incredible. So we launched Uber. We sent 1,000 emails in January of 2017, I think it was. Anybody want to take a guess at how many meetings we booked? Not you, I know you know the answer. We booked 327 meetings, in-person meetings for a salesperson to come visit the restaurant. And so we were looking at this just flabbergasted. Uber got 30x more out of their investment with us than any of our other customers. We're like, well, did Krista magically get 30 times better overnight, or was it something special about Uber? And so when I think about product, and that was the kind of customer that like put it right in my face, that product market fit, it's not binary, it's on a spectrum, you can always sharpen it. And I kind of contrast that with, like, what are signs that you don't have it is, you're not getting the referrals, or maybe I had a friend who, this wasn't in the AI space, but I think it's a parallel of a time. And I think the ultimate outcome of this particular trend is probably not going in the same direction as AI. But if you remember wearables, 10 or so years ago, everybody was really excited. And I had a friend who could sell a $30,000 pilot into any mining company in the world. And they were selling to the innovation team, and they could sell, they made so much money on just pilots. And do you know how many of those pilots actually got deployed? Exactly. And so I think the learning there was selling to the AI guy or the innovation team as opposed to the end user. And if you're not selling to the end users, if you don't have adoption with the end users, that might be a sign that it's not as strong as you think it is.
Awesome. And so maybe shifting gears a little bit, when things start to actually go right and you start to find that sense of initial product market fit in the market, Collin, you've written about this idea of customer development. Can you just share a little bit what that means? How does that look like? What are some of the questions that you're walking through when you're thinking about customer development and helping figure out what it is that you should be double clicking into as you're kind of getting your stride, so to speak?
Totally, and I won't go through the whole book, because those that know me know I could talk for hours, and there's a lot of smart people up here, and I want to share the time here. I think the biggest mistake a lot of founders make is you think about customer development as another kind of binary gate of, like, I've done customer development. I interviewed 20, 30 people. I heard this trend. Cool. That was a college level research project I did with people over here. Now I need to do the sales thing. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to buy Clarify, or I'm going to buy Lead Magic. I'm going to buy all of these tools, and now I'm going to go to market. And I think the biggest mistake is not realizing that these are two ends of a continuum, and you start here and then you slowly work your way from one side to the other. And so the way I like to handle it is, any great salesperson will tell you when you're on a call with somebody, the best thing you can do is book the next call. And so there's a funnel in the book that talks about, okay, this is the next call and the next call and the next call. And so I start with, at the very, very earliest stages of customer development, I start with exploratory. I'm looking for, hey, if there's any problem I could solve for you, what would it be? The next step is focus. And so when I move from exploratory to focus, I say, hey, when when I decide on something when I decide on a problem to focus on, if it's this problem, would you mind if I came back and got your feedback on what we're deciding to focus on? We're looking for something that's 10x better, and so that's what I want you to confirm that, hey, what we think we found is 10x better. And so that's the next one is a focus interview, and it's very like Mom Test or Get Out of the Building, like any of those kind of books where you're doing your standard customer development. And then I find after the focus interview, this tends to be where people end, and then they try and sell a design partnership. And I think there's a lot more of there's a lot that needs to happen between, we found a problem and we have a product that we can sell into a design partnership. And so I'd like to bring folks along with me on that journey. And so for me, after I've done a focused customer development interview and I've decided that this is a problem that we're going to focus on, the next step is, okay, well, give me some feedback on just a crappy paper drawing. Like, I'm going to sketch something out and tell me if this would be 10x better. And then I ask them, hey, when I decide to build this crappy drawing, would you look at my MVP? And then when I have the MVP, the question is, what do I need to build for you to use this every day? What do I need to build for you to get value out of this product? Then the next question is, what are the features I need to build in order to get you to use this every day? And then once they're using it every day, what are the features I need to get you to pay for it? And then the last question is, what features do I need to build to get you to refer me to 3 friends? And this comes back to the referrals. Like when I scaled Carb 0 to $1 million in 3 months, I was the only salesperson. And we didn't have a crazy outbound team. We had referrals. I think Aaron had a big list and we sent, some emails out and we got some traction from that. But there's no way, I think I was slinging $500 deals and we sold 83,333 in MRR in 3 months. I was wall to wall, 8 hours a day calls. And we closed like almost every one of them, and every one of them brought us a referral. And it wasn't because I was a great salesperson. I just showed up and people wanted the thing. And I was like, this is what the thing is. They're like, can I see it? I'm like, does it matter what color it is? Like, I literally used that when our demo was broken. I'm like, if it solves the problem you have, does it matter if it's purple or green? They're like, no. I'm like, great, I'll send you a user account. You let your SDRs tell you if they like it or not. And so I think from looking at stage to stage, that's kind of the biggest thing that you can do to create some of that momentum from this, to turn it from being a research project into something where you're getting revenue.
That's awesome. I love that framework. I'm curious, Patrick, how do you think about it in terms of prioritizing what it is that you need to build as you are starting to get some signals from your customers that they're using the products? I think to Collin's point, there's still a lot to get after and build, and you have to figure out how to prioritize what it is and filter through all these different signals and make that ruthless prioritization. How do you think about it? Is there something that you're tracking, or is it talking to the customers, a mixture of all?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always around continuous discovery. So I don't think the job of a product manager and the job of a seller is that much different, right? Like a great seller asks great discovery questions. They might not know what to build from it, but I can tell you, the best sellers I've ever worked with could be product managers because they're so close to the customer. And they understand their pain points probably deeper than anybody else in the organization. And so for me, as a founder of a company, it's I always think about I go into a conversation with somebody, and we're a little bit more mature now, where we have people coming in, we qualify them, but the first questions I have are always around pain identification, why are they reaching out to us? It's trying to extract as much information as I can, and that is all informing things that we then decide to prioritize as a team. So for me, it's I'm wearing both the seller hat and the product hat throughout the day, and so that's the way that I think about it. And the nice thing is as things shift in market, I have a continuous feedback loop from the market as well. So I'm not talking to customers, going heads down for 3 to 6 months, building something, then coming back out to validate it. I'm talking to people every single week. And so my favorite metric when I was at Amplitude is I would do on an average 12 customer calls a week. And so that was my proudest. I did more customer calls than any other PM of the organization, including our CPO, which he was my boss at the time, and I definitely let him know about that. And so that was my proudest moment, because it was hey, I want to actually be closer to the customer, which then got me to move from reporting to the CPO to reporting to the CRO.
It's constantly speaking to customers, getting their feedback, iterating on it. And I think with the AI tools too, it seems like at least from the companies that I work, it's easier to almost show them something and then see if they actually can react to it in real time and give you that feedback on, this is actually something that I want, or you're going way in the wrong direction, right?
The cost of a prototype is super cheap these days. I think so that is definitely for sure. I think the issue is once you show a prototype, you're already biasing them. So I like having a conversation before I show anybody anything. And this goes back into kind of how you're describing it. So back iteratively, I'd always do a problem interview and then a solution interview. And I'd split them out because like I would force them to grab another time with me, because if they weren't willing to grab another time with me to see the solution, it wasn't a real problem. And so it was the clearest articulation of like, hey, like this problem that we talked about, if you actually care about it, you don't want, like, I don't have to show you anything right now. You'll grab another time with me and you'll want to do it because I'm solving this problem for you. And so that's the same thing. If you show somebody a prototype, the fidelity might be a little too high fidelity and they're gonna nitpick on something, or they're gonna just go off on this tangent versus actually telling you what their problems are that they're having.
Yeah, totally fair. Loren, you work with a lot of our early stage companies at Madrona. What have you seen work from a good customer development story? What are founders trying out there? Any things that you're learning?
I think what you guys shared was spot on. I do think there's a customer and in some cases prospect obsession that needs to take place, and it's always interesting. The founders that spend the majority of the time not only talking to their customers, but understanding the demand capture and how the overall, how does the market hear about their product? What do they experience when they come to a website? When they download a trial? So a lot of times you find founders and they just spend time with the customers. And I think these are the questions that are spot on, which is, how are you using the product? What, if there was one thing that we could, magically add to the product, what would you like us to do? I think those are like totally dialed in questions for customers. But I think to your question, I think what I see with founders is the ones that are spending time understanding how they found their company in the first place and what that engagement looked like. You're really getting the end-to-end customer journey. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I think it's a 100%. I think this is the hard part. So even for Clarify, as an example, we have a PLG motion, so everyone comes in. So the vast majority of our customers come in inbound and sign up for the website. Like, I haven't gone through the onboarding experience in 6 months, and then you go through it and you're like, oh, like, why is it this way? Like, what is and like, I think that's the hard part, primarily when I'm just having calls and not thinking from like kind of a first principles mindset of like, what does that entire end-to-end customer experience look like? So even, we've tripped over ourselves here as well in many cases because something in the activation funnel was broken that we thought was intuitive that just wasn't.
I think it's a great point, though, and I think it's one of the things that, if you're really early stage, is a really important question to be asking the people that you're interviewing, because I want to know early days before I start building the product, am I building something that's an enterprise motion, a PLG motion? Is this going to be something that's kind of more mid-market and I'm going to need salespeople slinging this, or is this going to be a demo slinging that? Because you got to know how they typically buy products like this, and that's one of my favorite questions. Once I've kind of found something, is like, how do you typically, like, what was the last thing that you bought to solve a problem like this? What was your process? Who did you talk to? Where did you go? What communities do you kind of hang out in? And like those questions in the early days will really shape how you find more of them and the go-to-market channel, and help you understand what go-to-market channels will be profitable for you to onboard later.
Yeah, I think that's a great
And I would
point.
just add, it's not even the early days. It's kind of all of the days. The customers, and the number of times I remember sitting in board meetings where we'd be asked to sort of do a customer. It was like, you know what? Why don't we hire McKinsey, and we can do a $750,000 assessment of our whether customers like our new pricing model. And it's like, we could just ask the customers and see what they think. And it was like 10 times out of 10. They would tell you exactly it's like, call your customer and ask. Call your prospect and ask. And the other thing is people love to talk. It's human nature. They love to talk about their experience. So having the courage to call somebody that signed up for a demo and didn't sign up for the product, calling and introducing yourself and saying, I'm the founder of X. I'm really curious about the experience that you had. First off, how did you hear about us? Looked like you had a demo. You obviously didn't move forward. Totally fine, I understand. But I'd like to just understand a little bit more. And I will be honest, just as a completely side note, when I used to have like tough days, at the office, and there were quite a few of those, I would call a customer. It's like that was like the fastest path to sort of kind of getting my feet planted back on the ground and saying, gosh, we're doing amazing things for our customers. They love what we're bringing to the table every day. So my point is, there's never a bad time to be talking to a customer or prospect.
I think there's a good point, though, that the difference between a prospect and a customer is very, very different as well, though. Because I probably tend to bias 80% of my calls towards prospects and 20% towards existing accounts.
Yep. Yeah.
That's interesting. Is there a reason why?
Sales up into the right is the goal. Which, to be honest, like, it's actually easier probably to expand with existing accounts than it would be for that new. And so if you have an existing customer base,
Yep.
if you can build the right features to get them to consume where we're fully credit-based model, right, it's probably better.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I'm curious to understand is that, product market fit, as we're talking about, is always a spectrum, right? You're always, to your point, Loren, you're always finding it, you're always talking to customers, you're always trying to grow to that next milestone. So getting what you did to get you to 1 million probably won't scale to get you to 10 versus getting you to 100. And so, and especially in this world of AI where things are constantly changing, you constantly have to be evolving with your customer. I'm curious, because you saw so many phases at Docusign, I'm sure you had to retransition in a lot of ways. What is the biggest learning that you had in terms of just thinking again from first principles, from going from, you were there from 2 to, I think, 2 billion, right? So you saw a lot of different stages. Is there any key learnings that you had and takeaways to help you recalibrate what it might take to get to that next step?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the big one is, we were lucky enough to have product market fit that happened. It didn't feel like something that we had to maintain. It's like customers or prospects had a need. They would buy our product. We'd integrate into all of their back-end systems. We had, advocates in legal, finance. It was sort of one of these products that the entire company could use. So we were like, we're pretty good. I think the biggest check that we had was when Adobe, this is 2011, purchased EchoSign. And I remember waking up that morning and I had my little docu alerts. And I thought, should I just go back to bed? Like, this sucks. Come to find out, Adobe wasn't necessarily the best at acquiring companies, number one. Number two, it actually helped to validate our market. But number three, I think it actually really helped us innovate, because Adobe had they were a digital media company, they had sort of no business in that, that acquisition, and they made it very broad. It was sort of, their website was like, close more deals faster with Adobe Sign. And what we ended up pivoting to was a much more vertically oriented approach. It's like, if you're if you're in pharma, that's not what you're thinking about. If you work for the state of California, they're not talking about closing more deals faster. And so what we ended up doing was making small tweaks to our product, but creating a much more vertically oriented approach that was for real estate, healthcare, life sciences, financial services and insurance, public sector, tech. And because of that, and people would say, oh, that just sounds so expensive, because you're having to, every one of your product white papers has to be recreated to have a very specific message. And the reality was, it wasn't really there was no real change to our product. A lot of it was just messaging, and it was all the way through the sales organization. So we had a financial services sales organization. And when they called a credit union, they didn't ask for who's closing more deals faster over there. They knew that it was a VP of lending. Like, credit unions make money processing loans. So that's who you're targeting. And we had a very specific product that was really our core product, just slightly tweaked. And we had a pricing model that was, rather than seats, because they couldn't conceptualize that, it was around assets under management. Are you 1 to 2 billion under management? Here's your price. 2 to 3, here's your price. And our sales just skyrocketed. And I remember at the time Adobe was like, what's going on here? Why are you guys, we have a similar product. But I think it was that small tweak around product market fit, and it was less about what do we have to do to the product. It was more about how are we reacting to our market.
Where were you from a revenue and like product perspective when you made that change?
We started experimenting around 50 million. And you know, we started with a couple of small markets because I think there was a lot of question marks. You know, how expensive is this going to be? Like we have a marketing organization. Do we now need to like have 8 marketing organizations, like one for each vertical? Like where does this thing kind of stop in terms of expense? And what it turned out was not really. It's kind of the same product with the same. You're just tweaking it. And by the way, on our website, I think even today, there's like a drop down for industry, and it uses specific industries, nomenclature, acronyms. You know, it appeals to that buyer. And all of a sudden, when you're talking to a VP of lending and you're talking to a rep that sent you a white paper that is completely oriented around BECU as a credit union, and then you look at close more deals faster, it's like, I know what the option is. Like these guys are selling a product that's specific to my industry. But the question, I mean, it's a good question. It was right around 50, and I think by the time we were about 250, it was probably close to 70% of our business was vertically oriented.
Wow.
If Docusign was kind of there or going through that journey right now with AI, do you think that number would still be 50 million before you went and verticalized like that, or do you think it would be much sooner? I'm going
Based
off
on
book,
the
sorry.
No,
I
it's
love
fine,
that.
I
Based
love
on
it.
the success, I would say, what would the risk be in not moving faster? Because you'll either see success faster, or you'll fail faster and pivot. So I don't think I probably would have done it sooner.
So it sounds like vertical focus and targeting a customer more tailored to them is one way of kind of it's not necessarily, it's a different way of finding product market fit. You still have selling the same product. Another way is maybe building a net new product. I know maybe at Amplitude you guys kind of thought about what are new product extensions that we have to build to get to the next scale to build out a full platform. I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but I know that was a big focus back in the day.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, for Amplitude, it was a single product company. It was product analytics. They moved into digital analytics because they didn't just want to target product teams. They want to target marketing teams as well. And that was primarily addressing kind of Adobe, which was the largest incumbent within that category. And then, you know, part of the iterative acquisition was to expand into customer data platforms, and they launched their own experimentation product, Session Replay. But the goal is to really kind of build out this product operating system so that you can manage your entire product operations as a company. And they moved into like the qualitative space to compete with tools like Qualtrics. I think a large portion of that was around TAM. So for them, they basically became the number one winner in that category, but there was no real growth potential, and that category wasn't growing fast enough. So the only way that they can actually expand the business was to grow out into other additional offerings and sell to the similar buyer. The issue is that it was a complex sale where they had different stakeholders involved, and everyone had their own kind of idea of what the ideal solution would look like. And that's, I mean, honestly, similar to some extent with Clarify. I mean, we're a agentic CRM, but we also have folks on the marketing team and support team and success team. The bigger the company, the more stakeholders that care about customer data. And so it's like, how do we make sure that we're building a product that meets the needs of all these people? But the more personas that we target, the more complex it becomes when it comes to messaging, positioning, our website, everything else involved, pricing and packaging.
Yeah, totally. Collin, I'm curious if you have any thoughts. I know you found product market fit at different stages, at different companies, and probably testing for different things during those journeys. Any insights that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that I think the testing your product market fit is sort of like, I don't know if people are old enough to have grown up with like the original Jurassic Park, but there's that comment of like the raptors were always trying to test the fence. And as the founder, the non-technical founder, I always kind of see myself as like, we have this hypothesis. I'm the raptor. I'm the idiot who keeps jumping into the electric fence. Yeah. Even though now we've learned that they're like much, much smaller and there's no way they would jump that high and yada yada. But let's not nitpick an old great movie. But I kind of look at the direction that we're going, as a startup, whatever kind of version you're at, as like there's like a formula that leads to this hypothesis, and it's my job to see if I can break this hypothesis. Can I prove that we are wrong before we invest too much in building out the wrong thing or building the right thing for the wrong customer? And so I'm always, like Patrick, always doing customer development interviews. And I had it I think I had a monthly KPI in the very, very early days. And then when we got a little bit older and there was more folks around, I would take a month and it would be like customer month. And it was every week or every day I would have multiple interviews every day. And so I would kind of zoom out in the business and work on kind of managing the business at a high level. And then I would have 1 month every year where I was like, I got rid of all of my regular recurring calendar invites and I was just customer focused. And I think that was a really great thing to do 10 years ago when things felt like they were moving slower. Like I think the things that are true today were true back then. They were just moving a lot slower because it took a lot longer to build stuff 10, 15 years ago. And so I think we're moving a lot faster today, and that served me really well probably wouldn't work very well anymore. And I think it's probably closer to what Patrick was doing with what is it, 12 a week? Are you still managing to maintain that with Clarify?
Yeah, it's still the same, at least 10, 12 a week. But a lot of it's, like I love talking to customers as well. So you do the thing that you tend to like to do. And like, I think this is the biggest realization I had going from a company like Atlassian, where we're at PLG, where I think I probably spoke to, I was there for 4 years. I probably spoke to 20 customers that like scheduled interviews. Like it was just not part of our culture as much. Versus now, like I had to rewire my brain to actually get like dopamine hit when I talk to a customer, and especially if you talk to a customer and the call doesn't go well, you're like, cool, what would I do better? And like you just have to rewire your brain. I think that was the hardest part about becoming a founder for me.
Those are almost fun now. You're like, oh, I screwed that up in a new way.
Oh, I screwed it. I had a 7 a.m. call and then a 7:30 a.m. call with a team in Dubai, and I totally fucked it up this morning. And I was like, cool, I actually want to go ask our agent to give me feedback on this.
You can ask the agents now that are recording the call, what did you do wrong? What can you improve
well,
on the pitch?
I definitely have some,
you had some
ideas on
instinct
what
on
I did
that one.
wrong. But yeah, it was the staying up till 1:30 a.m. and taking a 7:30 a.m. customer call, which was probably the bad thing. Yes.
Fair enough. I wanted to open it up for some questions from the audience to see if anybody had anything. I have a bunch of questions I could ask, but anybody want to jump in? Tori?
Yeah, I had a question for Collin, but of course anyone else. I thought it was interesting at the beginning that you said that you've done 0 to 1 like a couple of times, and then you had a couple fails. And I wonder if you ever had a moment where you like were not product market fit, but like you weren't dead. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't 0. How did you know to like pivot, turn it off? If you were like, you felt like you were like almost there, but have you ever had that moment?
Unfortunately, many times. And I started as an entrepreneur at this co-working space up in Vancouver called Launch Academy. And I literally helped build the tables there and help them. I wasn't like a founder. I didn't help start it. I just was like physical labor. And folks used to joke that I was the cockroach of Launch Academy because nothing could kill me. Like I had 3 co-founders quit on me. I had 2 co-founders quit on me before I was like full time on it. I had 1 customer paying and live, and my co-founder was supposed to, on his like go live date, he was gonna quit his job at BMC and then he was gonna come work for me, or come work. We were gonna be co-founders, and he's like, you know what, man? I love what you're doing. I've loved everything. I don't want any equity. I'm moving to Guatemala to open a yoga studio with my girlfriend.
And is he happy?
I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I think he is. Yeah, he's very zen, very, very flexible. And so I was like, okay, I don't know how to code, but I'll go to Ruby on Rails meetups. And so I was learning to Ruby on Rails, not very well, like not very good. And I met my next co-founder, and he's looking at me and he's diagnosing my code, not even looking at my laptop. And the comment that sticks with me is, you clearly have skills that aren't this. Tell me why. But I think the biggest one was like that I'm not very good at quitting. And so I think I have kind of maybe the opposite problem with some people of like, I don't know when to quit. I don't know when to give up. And the best example is Carb. We went 0 to $1 million in ARR. We had such crazy like in 3 months, we had such crazy strong product market fit. We were bootstrapped and we were competing with like SalesLoft and Outreach. And it was a really, like everybody knew us for like 3-4 months. And then that referral flywheel just kind of disappeared. And the biggest thing was we scaled too quickly, too fast. We promised too much, and we didn't build nearly enough. And we made some idiot made some really bad technical decisions early days about what the engineers could and couldn't prioritize. And we hung on to that for probably 5 years. We hovered at like the $1 million mark. And like what I wish I would have done was been honest with myself. Like I was afraid. I was afraid of losing my CTO. Like I had advisors that told me, fire your CTO. He's not the guy. And I didn't listen. I was like, no, people can grow. I had all these I had all these reasons for why Preston would eventually get there. And they said, fire him, and I didn't. They said, go to the Valley and raise, and I didn't. They said, you know what, now is probably time to call it quits, and I didn't. And so there were all these moments, reflecting. They were moments, they were decisions I made out of fear of losing something. And I think the fear was like, if I quit this, if I fire Preston, I'll never find another CTO. If I go down to the Valley and I strike out, then the company is over. And obviously that was silly, but this was the fear. If I shut down Carb, then I'm done. I'm not an entrepreneur anymore. And I gotta go back to being a salesperson. And in hindsight, 2019, 2018 was probably the right time because we had just plateaued. We had tried all these things. Nothing was working. It was very clear that nothing was working, and yet I hung on. And we had revenue, and we had services, and the services were doing well. And then we kind of pivoted, and then all of a sudden we had this services company. And then COVID hit. And you're like, okay, well, we've got 85 people. I hate this company. Like we were 5 million in revenue, 85 people, 50 SDRs, and I've never been so miserable in my entire life. Everything seemed to be working from the outside, and I hated it. We had a great team, really great people, but I hated them all because having them meant I wasn't working on software anymore. And I got stuck in this situation because I wouldn't quit. And so, yeah. Don't be like that.
2026 services is the new hot.
Yeah,
Don't do
right.
it.
And I think the beauty with AI is you can actually pivot a little bit easier than maybe historically before, and you can build new software, you can figure out how to test it in the market, you can put it out there for people to try and use, you can do a lot of experimentation, which before took a big team and took a lot to do. So I think if you trust your gut, maybe now earlier on in this AI era, there is that opportunity to take that pivot and find product market fit in a different avenue, or maybe targeting it towards a different vertical or market that historically you couldn't do so easily. At least that's what I see in our portfolio.
Yeah, I've put a bullet
sure.
in 2 startups myself this month.
There you go. Iterate and move quickly. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
To all of you, you talk a lot about customer interviews. What would you say is one of the most important questions to ask in these interviews to really get the most insight out of the customer? Like psychologically or on the product, what would you say is one of the most important questions?
I mean, I have 2. One's like my sales hat on, the other's my product hat on. I'll lead with the product hat, which is like the magic wand question. It's my favorite question. I've used it for like a decade. If you had a magic wand, there's one thing I can do to help you here, what would it be? And so I leave it open, and it doesn't have to be about our product. It can be about anything. And like, I always follow up. So if it's a product related thing, I always follow up. When we release the thing, I follow up with them. If we don't release the thing, I tell them why. If it's related to something else, they might be hiring related, I try to go help them.
Oh man, you must have a great CRM.
Auto follow-ups, right?
Well, this was a pain in the ass a long time ago. The one that I like on the sales side is like, hey, why are we here today? Like, your time's valuable. Tell me why we're here. Because that immediately puts somebody like, hey, yeah, this time is valuable. How do I get the most out of this conversation? And so then they start to drive the agenda versus you driving the agenda.
Can I build on your magic wand question? Because I also love the magic wand question, and I used it a lot, and I found I let myself be misled by excitement, and we would chase really small features for people that were extremely excited about them. And I remember my CTO being like, why are we building this? I'm like, oh, because Lori said she wanted it. And he's like, well, what's the actual value going to be? And I was like, I don't know, but she was excited about it. And I found these 2 questions from, it was a book called The Lean Product Playbook, I think, and I use them as follow-up questions to the Magic Wand question, and they help kind of quantify what is the opportunity size of it, and it is, so for this problem, so I've asked the Magic Wand question, they've given me an answer, and the follow-on question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? Great. And I let them talk, and there's usually like an explanation. And that goes on for a couple minutes, and I listen, and I might ask a couple more questions. And then the follow-on question to that is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with how you're currently solving this? And this lets you get away from all of those like little like, oh, I couldn't update Excel this morning, and I'm really, really angry. But it's like a very important, but I'm like 9 out of 10 satisfied with it. And there was a product I was building that was this like fitness habit app. It was my COVID project. People learned to make sourdough, and I was like, I'm going to build another startup. It was a bad idea, but we validated it, and we thought we initially thought it would be for triathletes, and it was this like helping them build habits and help make their habit formation more fun. Well, it turned out everybody, we were talking about, hey, how important are your fitness habits? 10 out of 10. Obviously, these are professional triathletes. How satisfied are you with how you're currently solving it? Like 9 out of 10. So I'm like, okay, there's clearly no pain here. There's nothing worth building a company on, even though it is an extremely important problem for you. And so I find asking those 2 questions in conjunction with the Magic Wand question helped us map and find a new kind of target vertical, which turned out to be fat dads. And like there was actually some traction there. I didn't want to do a B2C startup, and we eventually ran out of steam.
I would say, those are great ones. I always would ask, if your account were to expire today, would you renew? And if so, why? And if not, why? And I always felt like that was, you really get to the core of the issue. And sometimes it's product feedback. Sometimes it's my account manager drives me crazy. But the reality is whatever it is, you're getting a really broad understanding. And at the end of the day, I don't know that there's anything else you want from your customers other than for them to see enough value to renew. So that always seemed like that was a moment for a customer. If you were to renew today or expire today, would you renew or not?
I think that's a great one. Maybe we'll do one more. I think we're running on time, but people will be around after, so feel free to ask questions. I think you had one here in the front.
So for B2B, I understand once we get the product market fit, we focus traditionally on the distribution channel after, but now given in the era, the product market fit is constantly moving and it's not stable, right? Like, how do we think about engaging the distribution channels? What stage could be better?
As early as possible. I've got a startup I'm working on, and we have like 80% of a usable product. And I started interviewing folks. I started doing customer development interviews a year and a bit ago, and then I started interviewing folks for a podcast 6 months around the summer, so maybe a bit longer ago. And everybody I've had on the podcast, now I'm building content, and I'm letting them know that, hey, once we've got something, I'd love your feedback on it. And that's been creating this additional little flywheel of I can reach out to people, talk to them about the kind of problem space, build a bit of a relationship, and then also have somebody I can follow up with. And so I'm doing it even before. This guy. No, I think I added you to my cold newsletter and then wrote an email saying, don't buy a CRM. And you're like, hey.
The one thing I'd probably add related to that question is like there's certain channels that are going to just take a lot longer to get off their ground. So like for us, we care a lot about community. The community is not something you start overnight, right? It's something you build over the course of months, if not years. And so like my favorite advice to give founders when they think about when you start thinking about building a company is like go invest in your network, go invest in community building. So like exactly what you're describing versus like, yeah, paid acquisitions, outbound, like there's certain things that you can probably spin up much quicker, but like community, network, brand, those things take a lot of time. They're like an active investment. Like I'd say Clarify punches well above its weight in brand and community because we just invest so much into those channels and have been since before we even had a product market.
I think it's really company dependent too, and it depends on the product that you're selling and what stage it is that you're at and how many people you have, and all these different channels take time to manage. You know, you can think about the partnership channels, the direct channels, and then within direct, how do you market? Where do you put yourself at? How do you test some things to see what's working, and longer term, if it is working, then double down and invest in that, and then figure out how to scale it up over time. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits all, but it's definitely great to be experimenting and constantly trying a bunch of different things. At least that's what I see with a lot of the companies that I'm working with at Madrona. I think that's all the time we have today. We wanted to leave some time for people to mingle with one another. I think everybody will be here for a little bit after and is happy to answer any questions, but appreciate everybody being here today. I know there's a lot of things that you could be doing, so spending it with us is much appreciated, and thank you all for joining us today as well. Awesome.
Yeah, great.